The girl walked through the crowded street, her steps soft, her presence almost invisible. Her name was Sarah, but hardly anyone remembered it. People passed her every day, at school, at the small grocery store, at the bus stop, but no one really looked at her. She was the kind of girl who sat in the back of the classroom, kept her head down, and never spoke unless someone asked her a direct question. She wasn't rich, she wasn't popular, and she wasn't the type to stand out. Her clothes were plain, her hair tied back simply, her notebook always in her hand. She wrote in it when no one was watching, filling pages with thoughts and stories she never shared. Most people thought she was just another quiet student in a big city. But that day, on that one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. The air was heavy with heat, and the street was alive with noise. Cars honked, vendors shouted, and people hurried with their shopping bags. Sarah walked with her head slightly lowered, trying not to bump into anyone. She was used to this rhythm: go from school, stop by the small shop, and head home. She liked being unnoticed, it made her feel safe. But then she saw something that made her stop. An old man stood near the corner. His back was bent, his hands shaking as he tried to lift a heavy bag. The bag looked full of books, or maybe tools. He pulled it at once, twice, and then his knees trembled. People walked past him. Some glanced at him, then turned their eyes away. Others even muttered in annoyance because he was blocking the way. Sarah froze for a second. Her heart beat faster. She thought, should I help him? She looked around. Nobody else was stopping. In fact, most were pretending not to see. That was normal here, everyone was busy with their own problems. Helping strangers was not common. But something in her chest told her she couldn't just walk away. So she stepped forward. "Sir, do you need help?" she asked softly. The old man looked up, surprised. His face was wrinkled, his eyes tired but sharp. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he gave a small nod. "Yes, thank you," he whispered. His voice sounded weak, as if speaking was effort. Sarah bent down and gripped the bag. It was heavier than she expected, but she lifted it with both hands. She carried it closer to the wall where he could lean against it. The man followed slowly, resting his weight against the bricks. Around them, people stared. A few shook their heads in disbelief. Some whispered to each other, "Why is she helping him? That girl never talks to anyone. She doesn't even know him." But Sarah ignored them. She smiled a little at the old man. "Better here?" she asked. The man nodded again. His lips trembled as if he wanted to say more, but he just gave her a long look. Something in his eyes, something heavy, something full of history, made her chest tighten. That moment could have ended there. She could have walked away after helping, gone back to being invisible. But before she could leave, a sharp sound cut through the street. W-E-O-O-O. W-E-O-O-O. A police siren. Everyone turned their heads. A black and white police car rolled slowly toward the corner, its lights flashing. People stepped aside, murmuring. Some even pulled out their phones to record. Sarah blinked, confused. Why was the police coming here? She glanced at the old man, but he was looking down, his jaw tight. The car stopped right beside them. Two officers stepped out, one tall with a hard face, the other younger, eyes sharp and alert. Both of them looked directly at the old man. Sarah's grip tightened on her notebook. She felt her throat dry. "Sir," the tall officer said firmly, "we need to ask you a few questions." The crowd grew louder. Whispers spread quickly. "What's happening? Did the old man do something wrong? Why are police here?" The old man didn't answer. His lips pressed together as if he carried secrets he couldn't speak. Then the younger officer turned his gaze toward Sarah. His expression softened just slightly, but his voice was still serious. "And you, miss," he said, "will need to know what you saw here." Sarah's eyes widened. She stammered, I didn't see anything. He needed help. No one was helping, so I carried his bag." Her voice was low, but clear enough. The officers exchanged a look. The younger one almost smiled, but quickly hid it. The taller one nodded slowly, then leaned closer to the old man. "You may not realize," he said, his tone heavy, "what you've just done." The words hit Sarah like a wave. What did he mean? She only helped someone carry a bag. Why would that matter? Why were police here at all? She looked around. The crowd's eyes were on her now, not just the old man. People were recording videos, whispering, staring. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. For the first time, everyone noticed her. And she hated it. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than the street noise, louder than the siren. She wanted to disappear. But she couldn't. The old man was still beside her, still silent, still looking at her as if she had changed something deep inside him. And the police, they weren't leaving. They were only getting started. The tall officer lowered his voice, but Sarah could still hear. "You helped him," he said. "That means you're part of this now." Sarah froze. Part of what? The younger officer stepped closer, his eyes locking on hers. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "But understand, this is bigger than you think." Sarah clutched her notebook tighter, her knuckles white. The world around her blurred with sound and movement, but one thought repeated in her mind, sharp and unshakable. What have I just stepped into? And that was how it began. Sarah, the girl nobody noticed, had made one simple choice. She helped a stranger when everyone else looked away. She thought it was nothing. She thought it was small. But that small act of kindness had already caught the eyes of the police, the crowd, and perhaps something even larger waiting beyond the corner of her quiet life. The street felt different now. The air felt heavier. Sarah had no idea that in helping the old man, she had set into motion events that would surprise everyone, herself most of all. Because sometimes, it only takes one act of kindness to uncover truths that were meant to stay hidden. And as the police stood there, their flashing lights painting the street in red and blue, Sarah realized something. Her life would never be invisible again. The police lights painted the street in sharp flashes of red and blue. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised, their whispers rising like a wave. Sarah stood frozen beside the old man, her notebook clutched tightly against her chest. She had no idea why helping someone had suddenly turned into a scene. The tall officer kept his steady gaze on the old man. The younger one turned toward Sarah, his tone calm but serious. "Miss," he said, "we need you to stay right here. Don't leave until we're done." Sarah swallowed hard. She nodded slowly, though her legs trembled. She wanted to walk away, melt back into the crowd, become invisible again. But something in his voice told her this was not a choice. The old man didn't move. He leaned on the wall, breathing unevenly, eyes shadowed by years of silence. Sarah glanced at him, then back at the officers. Her heart raced. Why are they here for him? The whispers around her grew louder. Maybe he's a thief. No, he looks too old. Maybe he's a criminal in hiding. Or maybe he's just sick and police want to help. Sarah heard every word. Each guess twisted inside her chest. She hated the way people were staring at him, at her. She hadn't asked for this attention. She only wanted to do one kind thing. Why did it feel like she was suddenly standing in the middle of a storm? The tall officer stepped forward, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. His voice carried over the noise. "Sir, state your name," he said to the old man. For a long moment, silence hung heavy. The man's lips trembled, then pressed together. He did not answer. The crowd gasped. A child whispered loudly, "Why isn't he speaking?" Sarah's stomach twisted. She wanted to speak for him, to say something, anything. But what did she even know about him? Nothing. She had only seen him struggling with a bag. The tall officer's eyes narrowed. "Sir," he repeated, "your name." The old man finally lifted his head. His voice came out rough, almost broken. "My name doesn't matter anymore." The words fell into the street like a stone into still water. The whispers exploded. What does that mean? Doesn't matter? Who talks like that? Something's wrong here. Sarah looked at the old man, shocked. Who says their name doesn't matter? What kind of life had he lived? The younger officer moved closer. He looked at the old man with a mix of pity and caution. Then he spoke softly. It matters to us, sir. It matters tonight. Please, don't make this harder. The old man's eyes flickered pain, fear, regret. He slowly turned his gaze towards Sarah. For the first time since she had helped him, he spoke directly to her. You shouldn't have stopped for me, he whispered. Sarah's breath caught. His words weren't angry, but heavy, like a warning. The younger officer turned to her. Miss, tell us exactly what happened. Did he say anything before you helped him? Sarah shook her head quickly. No, nothing. He was just trying to carry his bag. Everyone else walked past. He looked like he needed help, so I just did it. Her voice was small, but steady. She wanted them to believe her. She wanted this to end. The tall officer wrote something in his notebook. The younger one studied her face, then gave the smallest nod. You helped because he needed it? He asked. Yes, Sarah said, her voice firmer this time. Because no one else would. Something in her answer silenced the crowd. For a few seconds, even the whispers died. People looked at each other. Some frowned, others lowered their phones. The younger officer's eyes softened, as if her words had touched him. But the tall officer only sighed, closing his notebook. You may not understand, he said, his tone sharp but not unkind, but your choice matters now. You stepped into something bigger than yourself. Sarah's chest tightened. What did that mean? She glanced at the old man again, hoping for answers. But he only looked away, staring at the ground as if ashamed. The crowd began to stir again, restless with curiosity. A man called out, What's going on? Why are you after him? The tall officer didn't answer. Instead, he held up a hand, telling people to stay back. But the questions kept spreading, bouncing from one person to another, louder and louder. Sarah felt the weight of every stare. For years she had been invisible, now every eye was locked on her. And all because she carried a bag for a stranger. Her heart screamed inside her chest, What have I gotten myself into? The younger officer finally broke the tension. He stepped closer to Sarah and lowered his voice so only she could hear. You did nothing wrong, he said gently. Don't be afraid. But understand this, the man you helped, he's not just an old man. Sarah blinked, her breath caught. She wanted to ask, then who is he? But the officer's eyes warned her not to press. Instead, he added quietly, You may not realize what you've done. But it could change everything. The siren lights flickered over Sarah's pale face. She looked at the old man again, searching for answers. He still wouldn't meet her eyes. His hand trembled against the wall, gripping his bag like it carried not just weight, but secrets. The whispers of the crowd became background noise, fading in her ears. The only sound she truly heard was her own heartbeat, thundering with fear and confusion. In that moment, she knew her life had shifted. Something unseen had pulled her into its center. And she could not step out anymore. For the first time in years, Sarah was noticed. Not for her silence, not for her loneliness, but for one small act of kindness. And yet, as the police stood by, as the old man's secret hum unspoken in the air, the truth was clear. This was only the beginning. The street felt heavier than before. Red and blue lights reflected in shop windows, turning ordinary glass into mirrors of fear. Sarah stood between the old man and the officers, her hands gripping her notebook so tightly that her fingers hurt. People had stopped pretending to be busy. They were fully watching now. Every eye in the crowd was fixed on the strange scene, the girl who never spoke much, the old man with trembling hands, and the police who refused to explain. Sarah wanted to disappear, but she couldn't move. Not when the tall officer's voice broke the silence again. Sir, he said firmly, we need to confirm your identity. Right here, right now. The old man's shoulders shook. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His eyes, sharp with age, darted towards Sarah for a second, almost as if he was searching for courage. Then, slowly, he whispered two words. My name. Elias. The crowd murmured. The name meant nothing to most of them. Just an old man's name. But Sarah noticed the way the officers froze. Their eyes sharpened, their expressions darkened. The younger officer leaned close to the taller one and muttered something Sarah couldn't catch. The tall officer's jaw tightened. Elias lowered his gaze again, ashamed, afraid, or both. Sarah's heart thudded. Who is he? She thought. Why does his name matter so much? The younger officer finally spoke up. His tone was careful, almost too careful. Miss, do you know who this man is? Sarah shook her head quickly. No. I've never seen him before today. She wanted to say more, to explain again that she only helped because no one else did, but her throat tightened. Something about the way the officers were staring at Elias told her the truth was far more complicated than she could imagine. The tall officer nodded slowly, as if confirming something. He turned to the younger officer. Get on the radio. Tell them we found him. The younger one hesitated. Are you sure? Do it, the tall officer snapped, his voice low but filled with command. The younger officer stepped aside, pressing a hand to the radio on his shoulder. Static filled the air, then his hushed voice carried, This is Unit 27. We have Elias. Repeat, we have Elias. The crowd gasped at the words. Whispers grew louder. Elias? Who's Elias? They were looking for him? Why are they after an old man? Sarah's chest tightened. The world seemed to tilt. They weren't just here by accident. They had been searching for him. Elias finally spoke, his voice shaky but strong enough for everyone to hear. I told you, my name doesn't matter anymore. The tall officer's eyes narrowed. It matters to the people still waiting for justice. Sarah blinked. Justice? The word rang in her mind like an alarm. The old man looked at Sarah again, his gaze heavy with something she couldn't understand. Pain? Guilt? Gratitude? Maybe all of them at once. You shouldn't have helped me, he said softly. Kindness is dangerous when it's shown to the wrong person. Sarah's stomach twisted. She shook her head quickly. I didn't know, she whispered. I was just trying. I know, Elias interrupted. His voice cracked. That's why it matters. Because no one has helped me in years. The street grew quiet for a moment. Even the crowd seemed unsure how to react. His words carried weight, not just for Sarah, but for everyone listening. The younger officer returned, his face tense. He leaned close to the tall officer again. They're sending a transport. Shouldn't be long. Sarah's breath caught. Transport? Are they taking him away? She felt her chest tighten with panic. She didn't know this man, but the thought of him being dragged away by force made her feel sick. He had done nothing wrong in front of her eyes, he had only been struggling with a bag. The whispers in the crowd grew louder again. Maybe he's a criminal. Or someone famous we don't remember. Police don't send a transport for just anyone. Sarah hugged her notebook tighter, her heart racing. She wanted answers, but every question only brought more confusion. Finally, she found the courage to ask. Her voice trembled but carried enough for the officers to hear. What did he do? The younger officer looked at her, sympathy flickering in his eyes. But before he could answer, the tall officer cut in sharply. That's not for you to know. Sarah's chest burned with frustration. But I helped him. You said that matters. Doesn't that mean I deserve to know? For the first time, the tall officer hesitated. He studied her carefully, as if weighing the risk of truth. Then he spoke, his tone measured. He was part of something, years ago. Something that cost many lives. The words struck like lightning. The crowd gasped, some even stepping back. Sarah felt her knees weaken. Elias closed his eyes, as if the memory was too heavy to carry. "I've paid my price," he whispered. "I only wanted peace." The tall officer's jaw tightened. Peace doesn't erase the past. Sarah's thoughts spun. Cost many lives? What could he have done? Her heart refused to believe that the man she helped was a monster. His eyes didn't look cruel, they looked broken. She whispered almost to herself, "But he didn't seem dangerous." The younger officer glanced at her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Not everything is what it seems." The minutes dragged. The flashing lights, the restless crowd, the silence of Elias, it all pressed down on Sarah until she could hardly breathe. She wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but her feet stayed rooted to the ground. Finally, Elias opened his eyes again and looked at her. His voice was softer than before, almost fatherly. "You're the first person to look at me without hate," he said. "The first to see me as just a man." Sarah's chest ached. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. She didn't know what to say. She hadn't meant to be anyone's savior. She had only carried a bag. But maybe, for him, that small act was everything. The younger officer's radio crackled again. "Transport arriving in 2 minutes." The tall officer straightened, scanning the crowd. The whispers turned to shouts now, questions, accusations, theories. But none of them mattered. All Sarah could hear was the pounding of her heart. All she could see was Elias's tired face, staring at her like she was the last light in his fading world. And then, as if confirming her deepest fear, the tall officer leaned close to the younger one and whispered words that chilled her to the bone. "She might be the reason everything changes tonight." The sirens had faded, but the flashing lights kept the street alive with restless energy. The crowd had doubled. Some people leaned out of shop doors, others pressed close with their phones lifted high. A scene that should have been private was now public, captured from every angle. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of it all. She had never been noticed in her entire life. Now, dozens of cameras were pointed straight at her face. She wished she could shrink, vanish into her own shadow, but there was no escape. Beside her, Elias kept his head lowered, his trembling hand resting on the heavy bag. The officers stood like walls between them and the curious crowd, but walls couldn't stop questions. "Who is he?" someone shouted. "Why are they after an old man?" another asked. "Why's the girl with him?" Each question stabbed into Sarah's chest. She had no answers. She barely understood what was happening herself. Suddenly, a bright light flashed. Sarah flinched. A man with a camera pushed forward, microphone in hand. "Channel 7 News," he said quickly, shoving the mic toward her. "Miss, what's your name? Did you know this man before today? Why are the police involved?" Sarah stumbled back, eyes wide. Her throat closed up. She shook her head, but the man only pushed closer. "Are you related? Are you protecting him? Did he ask for your help?" The crowd leaned forward, hungry for answers. Phones recorded every twitch of her face. I don't know," Sarah whispered. Her voice was too soft, lost in the noise. But Elias heard her. His tired eyes lifted for a moment, watching her with quiet sorrow. The younger officer stepped in, raising his hand. "Back up. No questions right now." The reporter tried again. "The people deserve to know." "Step back," the officer snapped. His sharp tone silenced the man for a moment, but only for a moment. Reporters were like the crowd, they didn't let go once they smelled a story. The tall officer pulled out his radio, muttering about crowd control. Sarah's stomach twisted. This was spiraling out of control. "Look at her," someone in the crowd said loudly. "She looks guilty." "No, she looks scared," another replied. "Maybe she's a hero. Or maybe she's with him." Voices clashed around her. Strangers were shaping stories about her life without even knowing her name. Sarah gripped her notebook tighter, as if the thin paper could shield her from all the eyes burning into her. She wanted to scream, "I'm nobody. I was just trying to help." But her voice wouldn't rise above the storm. Then Elias spoke again. His voice was soft, but in the silence that followed, everyone heard him. "She doesn't know me," he said. "She only showed kindness. That's all." The words cut through the noise like a blade. The crowd grew quiet for a second. Even the reporters froze, their microphones lowered. Sarah turned to look at him. His face was lined with sorrow, but also something else, something almost proud. "You shouldn't drag her into this," he added, his voice breaking. "If you have questions, ask me. Leave her out." The tall officer's eyes narrowed. "You know it's not that simple, Elias." Elias closed his eyes. "Nothing is simple. Not anymore." The crowd began to whisper again, their curiosity reignited. Sarah's chest tightened. His words only made things worse. The mystery was now deeper, the questions sharper. And she was still trapped in the center. Another camera light blinked on. A woman reporter pushed forward this time. "Miss, what do you feel about being called a hero?" she asked. "A hero?" Sarah echoed, stunned. The reporter nodded eagerly. "You helped a man everyone else ignored. That's brave, isn't it? What made you stop for him when no one else would?" Sarah shook her head. "I'm not a hero. I just saw someone who needed help. That's all." Her words were simple, but they rippled through the crowd. Some people nodded slowly. Others whispered again. The reporter's smile widened as if she had gotten the perfect headline. The younger officer leaned closer to Sarah. His voice dropped so low that only she could hear. "Stay calm. Don't say too much. The less you say, the safer you'll be." His warning made her skin crawl. Safer? Safe from what? She wanted to ask, but his eyes told her to hold back. Minutes stretched like hours. The flashing lights painted everything in sharp colors. The reporters kept pushing, the crowd kept guessing, the officers kept watch. And through it all, Elias stayed silent, leaning against the wall with his bag beside him. Finally, Sarah whispered, almost to herself, "Why me? Why now?" Elias turned his head slowly. His gaze met hers, heavy and unshakable. "Because you saw me," he said softly. "And once someone sees you, you can't stay invisible anymore." The words hit Sarah harder than the cameras, harder than the whispers. She thought about her life, the quiet days, the empty seats beside her, the way people walked past as if she wasn't there. She had been invisible her whole life. And now, in one small act, she was seen by everyone. She didn't want it. She didn't ask for it. But there was no going back. The sound of heavy engines rolled into the street. A large black transport vehicle appeared, moving slowly through the crowd. Its presence made the whispers rise again, thick with fear and excitement. "They're taking him away. Why such a big vehicle for one old man? He must be dangerous." The vehicle stopped near the police car. Its doors opened with a metallic thud. Officers in darker uniforms stepped out, scanning the street with cold eyes. Sarah's chest went cold. This wasn't a normal arrest. This felt like something much bigger. The tall officer stepped toward the transport team, giving quick instructions. The younger officer stayed near Sarah and Elias. His eyes darted between them, protective but tense. The crowd pushed forward, desperate to see. Reporters shouted more questions. Cameras flashed. And Sarah, she realized something terrible. She wasn't just part of the scene anymore. She was the scene. Every headline would carry her face. Every whisper would include her name once it was learned. And every step forward would drag her deeper into a story she didn't understand. Elias noticed her shaking hands. He leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper. If they find out who I really am, he said, his eyes dark with warning, you'll be in danger too. Sarah's breath caught. Her heart hammered in her chest. She wanted to ask him, who are you? What danger? But the transport officers were already moving closer, their boots heavy on the pavement. The crowd roared with questions. The lights burned brighter. And Sarah understood, with chilling clarity, that her life had changed forever, not tomorrow, not later, but tonight. The black transport vehicle waited like a silent beast at the edge of the street. Its dark windows reflected the flashing red and blue lights, hiding whoever sat inside. The crowd had grown restless, reporters shouting questions over one another, phones raised high like weapons of light. Sarah felt smaller than she ever had before. But at the same time, she felt trapped in a spotlight she could not step out of. Her face, her trembling hands, her very silence, everything was being recorded. And beside her stood Elias, the old man whose presence had turned her world upside down. The younger officer leaned close again, his voice low and urgent. Miss, you need to prepare yourself, he said. This isn't ending tonight. People will want answers. Some will think you're a hero. Others might think you're something else. Sarah's eyes widened. But I didn't do anything. I just helped. I know, the officer said, his gaze steady. But sometimes helping the wrong person makes you a target. The word target sank into her chest like ice. The tall officer motioned to the transport team. They began moving forward, their boots striking the pavement in heavy rhythm. The crowd pushed back instinctively, though their phones stayed high. Elias straightened a little, his frail body trembling but his eyes sharp. For the first time, Sarah saw not just weakness in him, but strength, like a man who had survived storms before. Still, he looked at her with regret. You shouldn't be standing here, he whispered. They'll see you with me. They'll mark you, just like they marked me. Sarah shook her head quickly, though her voice trembled. I couldn't just leave you there. You needed help. His lips curved into something close to a smile, though sorrow still filled his eyes. And that is what makes you different. But difference comes with a price. The officers in dark uniforms reached them. One of them, taller than the rest, pulled out restraints. Elias, you're coming with us. The crowd gasped. Sarah's breath caught. This was real, he wasn't just being questioned. He was being taken. Elias didn't resist. He held out his wrists slowly, his hands shaking. I've run long enough, he said quietly. The restraints clicked into place. The sound was sharp, final. Sarah flinched. Her chest ached as though the metal had closed around her own wrists. Reporters screamed questions louder now. Who is Elias? Why is he dangerous? Why did the girl help him? Cameras flashed wildly. The younger officer stepped in front of Sarah, trying to block the view, but it was impossible to shield her completely. She whispered, her voice breaking, please, just tell me. What did he do? The younger officer hesitated. His jaw clenched, torn between duty and compassion. Finally, he leaned closer. He was once part of something big. Something that ended with blood. That's all I can say. Sarah's heart dropped. The words echoed in her mind. Ended with blood. Her eyes darted to Elias. His face was calm now, almost peaceful, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. The tall officer gave a command, and the transport team began leading Elias toward the black vehicle. The crowd pushed closer, shouting, trying to capture every step. Sarah couldn't move. Her legs felt like stone. Her chest burned with questions she couldn't ask. She only knew one thing: this wasn't fair. Whatever he had done in the past, in this moment he had only been an old man struggling with a bag. And she had only been a girl who refused to look away. Yet here they were dragged into something far greater. As Elias passed her, he paused for one final moment. His restrained hands shook as he turned his head toward her. His voice was quiet, but strong enough to reach her through the noise. Don't regret it, he said. You gave me one moment of kindness in a world that had forgotten me. Whatever happens next, hold on to that. Tears blurred Sarah's vision. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She wanted to reach for him, to say she was sorry, to ask who he really was, but the officers pushed him forward. The crowd swallowed him in flashes of light and shouts. The younger officer touched Sarah's shoulder gently. "Miss, you should go home. Stay away from the cameras. Stay quiet for now." Sarah looked at him with wide, tearful eyes. "But they'll twist everything. They'll make it look like I'm part of this." He nodded grimly. "They already are. That's why you need to be careful." His words made her stomach twist with fear. The crowd wasn't just curious, they were dangerous. With every recording, every whisper, her face was being tied to Elias. And if Elias was truly what the police hinted at, then her life had just become a risk. The transport vehicle's doors slammed shut with a metallic echo. The sound silenced the crowd for a moment. Then the engine roared, and the vehicle pulled away, taking Elias with it. Sarah stood there, trembling, as the lights faded down the street. She felt empty, like something had been ripped away from her. The younger officer gave her one last look. "Go home. And if anyone asks, say nothing." Then he followed the tall officer toward their car, leaving Sarah alone with the crowd. Phones still pointed at her. Whispers still circled like vultures. "She knows more than she says. Maybe she's protecting him. Or maybe she's just a foolish girl." Sarah's chest tightened until she couldn't breathe. She pushed past the voices, past the cameras, her steps quick and uneven. She didn't look back. She couldn't. But even as she ran, she knew the truth. There was no going back to invisibility. No erasing what had happened. Her kindness had placed her in the center of a storm. And storms didn't pass without leaving scars. That night, as Sarah closed her door and pressed her back against it, she realized the full weight of what the younger officer had said. Kindness had made her a target. And someone, somewhere, would come looking for her next. Sarah barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, flashes of the crowd's faces appeared, eyes wide with suspicion, cameras pointed like weapons, voices whispering lies. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from numbers she didn't know. News articles spreading pictures of her face. Social media full of strangers arguing about her. Some called her a hero. Others called her a traitor. She had never asked for any of this. All she had wanted was to help. By morning, the air outside her window felt heavier, filled with an invisible tension. The streets were quieter than usual, as though the city itself was waiting for something. She sat at the small table in her kitchen, staring at her untouched tea. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then came the sound. Sirens. Not faint and distant this time, but close. Louder. Urgent. Sarah froze. A deep, heavy engine rumbled beneath the wail of alarms. She rushed to the window, and her heart dropped. Another black transport vehicle was moving slowly down her street. Behind it, police cars with flashing lights. They were coming back. A rapid knock struck her door. "Sarah! Open up, it's the police!" Her breath caught in her throat. Fear burned in her chest. She hesitated, but something inside her whispered, "Run." Before she could move, the knocking grew louder, more desperate. "Sarah, it's me." That voice. She recognized it. It was the younger officer. She unlocked the door with trembling hands. He rushed inside, shutting it quickly behind him. His uniform was disheveled, his eyes filled with urgency. "You don't have much time," he said. "They're not just here for Elias anymore. They're here for anyone connected to him, including you." Sarah's stomach twisted. "But I didn't do anything." "I know," he said firmly. "But people higher up don't care. They want control of the story. And right now, you're part of it." Her knees weakened. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "What about Elias?" she whispered. The officer hesitated, then spoke low. He's being moved tonight. Someone doesn't want him to reach the safe facility. And if they stop him, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Sarah understood. Elias's life was in danger. Fear and anger warred inside her. This wasn't fair. None of it was fair. The officer leaned closer. Listen to me. You have a choice. Stay quiet, hide, and hope they leave you alone, or stand up. Say the truth. Show them what kindness really means. His words struck her. For a moment, she saw herself again on that sidewalk, the old man with the heavy bag, the way everyone had ignored him, the way she had chosen to help. That choice had changed everything. Maybe now, she had to choose again. Her heart pounded, but her voice came out steady. I won't hide. Not if Elias is in danger. Not if my silence means losing what's right. The officer nodded slowly, respect in his eyes. Then you need to be ready. Because they will test you. The night came heavy and tense. Sarah found herself in the back of a police vehicle, flanked by officers loyal to the truth, not to power. They drove in silence, streets empty, sirens off. When they reached the edge of an industrial yard, she saw another black transport waiting, the one carrying Elias. But before they could get closer, headlights flared in the darkness. Another group of vehicles appeared, blocking the road. Men in dark uniforms stepped out, armed and ready. It wasn't just about law anymore. It was about silencing. Chaos erupted. Officers shouted, weapons raised. The younger officer shielded Sarah as they rushed forward. And there, through the flashing lights, Sarah saw Elias. He was being pulled from the transport, struggling against the men dragging him. His face twisted in pain, his voice hoarse as he called out. Leave him! Sarah cried, breaking free and running forward. The world seemed to freeze. Everyone turned. The crowd of uniforms, the clash of orders, the bright glare of headlights, all eyes landed on the small girl who dared to step between them. She stood there, trembling but unyielding. Her voice cracked but carried through the chaos. You can't take his dignity away. He's not just a name in your files. He's a human being. And no matter what he's done, he deserves kindness. The silence after her words was heavy, cutting through the noise. Even the men holding Elias faltered for a moment. The younger officer's eyes widened. He hadn't expected her to speak with such fire. Elias, weak and battered, lifted his head. For the first time in years, hope flickered in his tired eyes. The moment didn't last. The men pushed forward again, but now others hesitated. Some lowered their weapons, uncertain. The weight of Sarah's voice had cracked their resolve. The younger officer shouted orders, rallying those who still believed in justice. A struggle broke out, but it wasn't one-sided anymore. Through the chaos, Sarah reached Elias. She held his arm, steadying him. I told you I wouldn't regret helping you, she whispered. Tears streaked down his face. And I told you, your kindness would change everything. The night ended with sirens filling the air, reinforcements arriving, and the corrupt officers dragged away. Elias was finally secured, not as a prisoner silenced in shadows, but as a man whose truth would come out under protection. And Sarah, once invisible, once just the girl nobody noticed, was now known everywhere. Not because of fame, not because of scandal, but because of one simple choice. She had refused to let kindness be crushed. Days later, the world still spoke of that night. Some argued, some doubted, but many began to look at strangers differently. Sarah returned to her quiet life, but it was no longer the same. People noticed her now not for her face, but for what she had done. And deep down, she knew Elias had been right. Her small act of kindness hadn't just surprised everyone. It had changed everything.